We were supposed to be visiting with Amy Tarkanian. She is a little under the weather, and so we got a very able pinch hitter. And as a former athlete himself, he understands what pinch hitting's all about. Coming off the bench when he needs to. Danny Tarkanian, that's a pretty good pinch hitter. God, bringing him off the bench. Giancarlo Stanton or something like that.
Now, don't fool yourself. Amy is much better on these shows. This is where she excels.
She feeling any better today?
Yes, she's feeling a lot better today.
Good.
She's been in bed the last 3 days, so today she's getting better.
I want to ask you, because we've been talking about it in our first hour, and I promised I would ask you. The president took a lot of heat for some tough talk about North Korea and Kim Jong-un and calling him Rocket Man and all of this stuff. And they also said that he was bringing us to the brink of nuclear war with North Korea. The president just kind of laughed. And now we're on the verge of a major, decades-long quest for denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. What do you think of all this? And the president stood his ground. He talked very tough sanctions. He threatened them with annihilation if they even blinked. And now the North Koreans are making major strides. And again, we don't know how it will end up, and he even said that. What do you make of the president and his performance dealing with North Korea?
Well, first of all, you have to be very cautious on how you feel North Korea and its dictator are really handling things, because they have their way of trying to manipulate a situation, and they have played our leaders from the United States for decades now, where they've gotten concessions from us, and they have continued to build their arsenal. So we really don't know for sure if they're capitulating to President Trump's demands, but it appears they are at this point. Now, this is the funny thing is the media just attacks Trump every time he says something, because they take him, what he says, literally, and they don't understand his negotiation style. He's always negotiating one way or another, sometimes starting real high, and when he comes down to a lower agreement, the media ridicules him and says how he broke a promise, whatever. But in reality, he started at a point no one ever thought he was going to get, not even he, and everybody was willing to accept where he ended up at. He got very bellicose with North Korea, and the media freaked out and thought he was going to do something crazy and start another world war. But instead, he has a chance to possibly have the greatest international achievement since the taking down of the Berlin Wall, if he can deneutralize North Korea.
You know, last night, Sean Hannity on his show went through the history of this, and this dates back to Clinton. Yeah. Clinton thought he did a deal that made sense with North Korea, and then North Korea went back on everything it said it was going to do. But the fact is that Bill Clinton couldn't get this done. George W. Bush couldn't get this done. Obama could not get this done. And yet it looks like we are on the verge of and again, cautiously optimistic, at least on the cusp of maybe getting it done.
Yeah, which would be, again, truly remarkable and one of the great achievements we've had in decades internationally. But, if you look at history, because that's how you try to decide how you're going to handle other situations. Look what Clinton did to North Korea, where he would appease them, and they would say, okay, we're not, I'm sorry, to North Korea. Yes, how they would give them certain concessions, and North Korea promised, okay, I won't do my nuclear program anymore. And then once the concessions were used up, they would start up again. It's exactly what Iran's done. And Iran's in the same position now. They're in a position, they take $750 billion from the United States. They say, okay, we're going to stop our nuclear program for a little while. Iran's even a little bit more honest, because they say afterward, it's 10 or 15 years, they can start their nuclear program up again. What kind of deal is that for the United States? We give them all this money, we take away the sanctions, and Iran says, okay, we'll stop it for 10 years, but 10 years from now, we'll finish up and have our nuclear arsenal. It's ridiculous, the type of deals that we've had, and it started with North Korea and continued with Iran, and President Trump has had a whole different philosophy on how to handle this, and so far, it looks like he's going to have some success with it.
I know you have been promoting the endorsement by the president. You've gotten an endorsement from the president, which I think is incredible. But you're also starting to get other endorsements across the board.
You know, they talk about the endorsement by President Trump, and everybody is saying, well, that's really a great breakthrough. But I talked with President Trump, and I would hope that he's a man of his word and would follow through with what he said. And I saw him, he came to church 9 days before the election, and he thanked me for having the courage to stand by him when all the rest of the top of the GOP in Nevada had abandoned him. He said I had a great family. My dad raised me the right way. And he told me I was his made man. Well, if I was his made man, I certainly would hope he would endorse me in this race, certainly this congressional race. So, it's something I expected. And look, I've taken a lot of heat for supporting President Trump's America First policies. Now we're seeing the impact those policies are having on our country, and more people coming around and saying, hey, wow, this really is pretty good. They just didn't see it when candidate Trump was running for office.
I want to ask you about other endorsements because you got into this race late. There are some people that may have already made their endorsements known and now will have to pull back or change their endorsement. Give me where you are there as far as endorsements.
I never went out and sought endorsements. Like you said, I'm making a big deal about the President Trump one. I mean, I didn't ask President Trump to endorse me. I just said, if you want me out of this race and into the congressional race, you need to publicly state that, and he did. Adam Laxalt called me up and offered his endorsement. I have not called anybody and asked for an endorsement. I'm not sure because somebody's an elected official, they know more or should tell the people here in Nevada who to vote for. I never listen to anybody endorsement when I decide who to vote for, and I would hope that most of the voters at least will pick the person based upon what they feel is the best representative. But I've been endorsed by certain organizations like the Right to Life, which is important to me because I've been very pro-life throughout my life, and I believe very strongly that life starts at conception. Dr. Gorka, who I think, there's an article today attacking Dr. Gorka and saying he's a Nazi lover or something, some ridiculous stuff. But, I listen to him and what he says on Fox News and the position he takes, and I agree with those positions. And he came out and supported me, as did Pastor Burns and some others that were very supportive of the America First agenda, which I agree with.
New poll numbers are out. You can choose to believe them or not believe them. That's coming up next. We'll get to those numbers. We'll give you the numbers as well as we continue live and local now. Danny Tarkanian in the house joining us, and new numbers have come out. John Ralston came up with some new numbers, and again, the Mellman Group. It's it's Harry Reid's pollster. And Steny Hoyer's pollster.
That works perfect for Ralston. That is left-leaning news organization with the left-leaning pollster. That's perfect.
Let's talk about your race. First of all, I know Victoria Seaman did some polling that showed you way up. Your nearest competitor was like at 9 or 10%. You had something like 37%. What does this new polling show you? And this is a little more recent after you've been in the race.
Well, they didn't actually poll any districts. So there wasn't any congressional districts or any state senate or assembly districts. What they did was they polled the statewide races. That's probably makes sense because they did one poll and they did throughout the state. But there were some shocking surprises in there. For one, I firmly believe Adam Laxalt's leading the first of all, somebody gets through the primary with Dan Schwartz, who I like Dan Schwartz a lot too. I like Adam a lot. But according to the polling, Adam's up by like 50% in that poll. But in the general election, they had Adam losing to both Sisolak by 6% and Chris G by 3%. And I just think Adam has a much stronger campaign and is more well-liked than that. So I think that those numbers are a little bit hard to agree with. But again, I'm not a pollster. I don't know. This guy's had some track record of being very accurate, and sometimes he's been off. So who knows?
Do you believe in polling? And I know polling has worked both for you and against you over the years.
Always worked against me.
I was trying to be generous.
I've always had, I probably because of my high name ID, I've always polled higher than I have had on election day, and also I think also the polling doesn't take in effect those deceitful and defamatory ads they keep running against me at the end of the campaign, and that I think sways the undecided voters that way. But I believe the polling is relatively accurate. If you look at one and you believe it 100%, you're probably going to be off. But if you see several of them and they're in a range, you feel that range is probably pretty accurate.
Again, Danny Tarkanian joining us. We've got judges across the country that absolutely hate the president's travel ban and all kinds of things related to it. Now we have, in fact, I just had a story this morning in the L.A. Times that apparently this U.S. Supreme Court is hearing arguments today, and the conservative judges were all backing the president.
Yeah, they heard the travel ban argument today at the U.S. Supreme Court, and I didn't hear how the judges were responding.
According to the L.A. Times, the conservative judges loved the president.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the president exercising a duty that's specifically provided to him in the U.S. Constitution. It's really ironic to see these other judges, the non-conservative, if you want to call them that, would be against it. They use the fact that he used some political rhetoric to claim that these are discriminatory measures, when in reality, if you look at what he's banning and what he's trying to do, it really isn't. So we're going to get a final decision on that pretty soon, and I think that would be very good. The one that just shocks me to no end is the lower court decisions right now, and I can understand if it's a Ninth Circuit decision because they always come up with some crazy, very liberal decisions. But this is a decision by a judge appointed by George Bush, where he came out and said President Trump's decision to stop the DACA program was arbitrary and capricious and stopped President Trump from stopping it. It just baffles me. I mean, first of all, it was passed by an executive order of President Obama. Can't a new president come in and stop any executive orders he wants? I mean, isn't that his prerogative? That's why you have laws that are passed through Congress and signed into law by the president, which would have to go back and have a congressional action. But an executive order has not been approved by Congress. It's just the president's unilateral decision. Any new president should be able to make his own decision. How could this judge, now there's three of them now, two of them I assume are from probably Hawaii and some other places that are...
The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals.
Sure. But this one was I think it was from...
Chicago?
D.C. or something. I believe it was an East Coast one. But it was a judge appointed by George Bush. And he came out and said it's arbitrary and capricious because they didn't give... He said the President Trump's staff did not give a good enough legal argument of why they feel the executive order was unconstitutional. Who cares if it's unconstitutional or not? It's an executive order. It's an order by a previous president. Those things don't carry over automatically. The new presidents can get rid of those. And I'm just baffled by it, and I think it really shows where our country is going, where each of the branches of government are overstepping what they should be doing. The executive branch is overstepping their powers that have been given to them in the Constitution, and I think that's unfortunate. Now you're seeing the judicial branch do it even more so.
Let me just ask you, where do you see this thing going? Because the president I thought was very benevolent. Instead of giving DACA folks 800,000 opportunities at citizenship, a path to citizenship, he gave them 1.8 million. Where and the Democrats have run away. I mean, we can't find Schumer or Luis Gutierrez or any of these people.
Or Susie Lee.
Susie Lee. I was going to ask you about that next.
Susie Lee's for open borders, so she certainly isn't going to approve anything President Trump wanted. But what you said really, this is, I've been saying this now for 8 years, that Democrats do not want a solution to immigration, illegal immigration problem, because if they do, they lose that base of voters. Because the only reason why the Hispanic voters are voting at a higher percentage with Democrats is because of this issue. I mean, Hispanics are family-oriented. They're hardworking, entrepreneurs. They believe in a lot of the principles on the GOP side, not the Democrat side. But this issue keeps them in the Democrat corner. So the Democrats do not want a solution to it. As you mentioned, President Trump offered something that was twice as generous as Obama's executive order plan, and they turned it down. And they turned it down under the auspices of we don't want to secure our borders. Well, the vast majority of Americans want secure borders, whether it's with a fence across all the way or partially across the way or with other technologies. We all want a secure border. Anybody who doesn't want a secure border should leave our country because they're endangering the rest of us here in America. And they don't want to get rid of chain migration where you could bring in third cousins to come into the country and just because somebody else has come in legally. The reasons the Democrats don't hold water, it's because they don't want to lose this issue for political purposes.
Okay, final question, and it's something I'm going to ask you every time you're in, because I know you're starting to do more Oppo research on Susie Lee and find out. The only thing I can ever hear from anybody, she's rich, she's a philanthropist, she's a fundraiser, and she's going to raise millions of dollars herself. And if she has to cut a check, she'll just cut a check.
She's a far left liberal by far. I mean, you look at the positions she takes, and they're so far away from the mainstream Americans, it's not even close. And that's what the focus has got to be on. Do we want open borders? Do we want sanctuary cities? But she's come out in favor of sanctuary cities. Do we want to have a single-payer healthcare system like she's arguing for? Look at the positions she wants is what's been repudiated by the voting public when they voted for Donald Trump and a Republican-controlled Congress and the Senate. And our responsibility is to make sure the voters know her positions and they don't get diverted by these, again, going to be deceitful, defamatory ads against me that aren't true. And
they're coming.
Personal.
They're coming. They're coming.
Sure, but it won't be about issues. They always make up these lies about me that and they stay away from the issues because they know I'm on the right side of the issues for what the hardworking middle-class Americans want in our country, and Susie Lee's on the far left.
If folks want to help you, if they want to put yard signs, if they want to walk neighborhoods for you, they want to give you money, where do they go?
Tarknv.com, TARKNV for Nevada.com.
Boy, you keep it simple, even for guys like me. Thanks, man. Give Amy my best.
I will, thank you.
And we'll see you next week.
Sounds great.
That's Danny Tarkanian in the house, joining us live and local now.